You obviously, Dr. Ayittey, you've been following the just concluded summit in Malabo in Equatorial Guinea. First of all, there are a lot of people, frankly, who felt that that was probably not the right place to hold an African Union summit.
Well, it's, you know, I think we need to get serious in Africa and know exactly what we're trying to promote in Africa if we want to promote democracy. And then obviously the leaders that we choose to lead the African Union ought to be practicing democracy. And if we're fighting dictators, you know, then we have to send out a clear message. But we can't be fighting Gaddafi in Libya when the chairman of the AU itself, Obiang of, you know,
Equatorial Guinea.
Of Equatorial Guinea, himself is a dictator.
But his supporters, and indeed some in the international community in policy making, will tell you that he has been holding periodic elections.
Well, but he always wins it, you know, with, you know, 90% of the vote. He did that in 2006, you know. Same thing, you know, look, the elections in Africa, we all know they are farcical elections. Ethiopia held elections, you know, in 2010, May of 2010. Zimbabwe won 96.2%. Come on. Look, you know, these are the times that, you know, even children can see through all this charade. And we need to get serious in Africa. If it is democracy, we must practice democracy. But even the AU doesn't even understand what democracy is.
Have you ever been to Equatorial Guinea, by the way?
No, I haven't been there.
But if you look at the statistics, what is the situation, you know, what does the situation look like in terms of distributing resources, especially given, frankly, that you have a very small population, less than 1 million people, plenty of oil.
Yes.
The president has a huge palatial mansion nearby here in Potomac, Maryland.
Equatorial Guinea should not be a poor country. As a matter of fact, if the oil wealth of Equatorial Guinea is distributed equally among its people, it should have a per capita income of that of Spain or Portugal.
Actually, they have the, I think they have the highest per capita actually distribution if you looked at the statistics on the African continent, Equatorial Guinea.
Yes.
But in reality,
the
way the man goes about distributing the wealth, he moves around Malabo, for example, with brown envelopes stashed with money, identifying and giving those envelopes to individuals. Is that the way to go about development?
Yeah, about 60% of the Equatorial Guinean people live in poverty, you know, less than $2 a day. And, you know, Obiang doesn't declare how much the country earns from oil. He says it's a state secret. And if you may remember when the scandal about Rick's Bank here in Washington, broke, you know, Rick's Bank had, you know, bank accounts which was being kept by Obiang and his family.
It was involved in laundering his money.
Well, look, you know, this is where, you know, we need to get serious about this because, you see, when you have huge social inequality, lack of jobs, for example. This is what has been sparking the revolutions in North Africa and also elsewhere on the African continent. When you have, you know, people when they are fed up with these dictators.
So how come the people of Equatorial Guinea, we didn't see them in the streets of Malabo?
Well, they made some attempt to, but there has been a brutal clampdown. And, you know, access to the internet has been blocked. It's the same thing that you're saying in Zimbabwe, for example. Because, you see, the Equatorial Guineans, you know, Obiang doesn't want them to see what's going on in North Africa or even in Egypt or Tunisia, for example.
If you were to give some advice to Obiang, the president of Equatorial Guinea, and some of his many colleagues across the continent, really, what would that be? That
is simple. I mean, look around you in Africa. The form of governance that he has in Equatorial Guinea is not sustainable. Eventually, all these dictators will fall. Okay, Ben Ali is gone in Tunisia. Hosni Mubarak is gone in Egypt. Mugabe will go. Museveni in Uganda will also go. Many of these dictators will fall, and when they fall from grace, you know, from grace to grass. So this is where, you know, these leaders have to sort of get ahead of the curve in terms of, you know, after all, the man has been there for almost 19 years.
But what about the people themselves in those particular countries that you mentioned? shouldn't they, frankly, be also doing their part so as to make it difficult for the leaders that you characterize as dictators or despots?
Well, the thing is, we have opposition forces, and in many countries, the opposition forces have been weakened. They have been brutalized. I mean, they don't have any access to the media, for example. They don't have access to funds, for example. I'll be the first one to admit that, the opposition forces themselves need to be strengthened, because in many countries they are fragmented and they need to come up with better strategies. And, just holding demonstrations and saying that, Obiang must go, Mugabe must go is not enough.
But you know what happened in Ethiopia in 2005?
I know.
People went to the streets of Addis Ababa.
I know.
And what happened?
Well, the thing is, in the case of Ethiopia, you had too many opposition parties. I mean, you had 92 opposition parties, and this is where I feel that the opposition in Africa too needs to get its act together. If you have 92 opposition parties challenging Zenawi, for example, I mean, it's laughable. Same thing in Cameroon. In Cameroon, you have more than 200 opposition parties. Come on.
Are they really parties, or are some of them, perhaps if not many of them, briefcase political parties?
Yeah, there's, briefcase political parties set up by Biya himself, and this is where, sometimes, we say that the opposition leaders themselves also need to get the act together. So that, look, you need to have an intelligent opposition to make democracy work. And these leaders, of course, having brutalized the opposition, they know that they have all the power. They're not, but you see, there's something that they has to remember. And, I like to quote, U.S. President Kennedy. He said, those who do not make peaceful change, possible, make violent revolution inevitable. So
make it inevitable.
Yes.
He also said, of course, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country.
Precisely. Okay. So the leaders, need to get, first of all, take a look at the African Union. What does this stand for? What is membership in the African Union?
No indifference in a member, no indifference in the internal affairs of a member country.
Take a look. They copied the African Union after you model it after the European Union.
Correct.
But even in the European Union, before you become a member, there are certain criteria required.
There are certain benchmarks.
Yes, that you have to satisfy.